the Honda NSX, the everyday supercar.
Behind us is the Honda NSX. Now this one's a little bit different from our other car reviews because it's almost 30 years old.
You can't do anything but look at it, can you? You really can't, especially when you look at the things that make it. I mean, it makes me tongue-tied. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It is a very impressive looking machine.
It just encapsulates 80s supercars, doesn't it? It really does. Even though this, by the end it was launched, I think it was late 1990, wasn't it?
Well, yes, and it was created to tackle V8 Ferraris whilst also being an everyday sports car.
Yes, well that's it. When you've got a mid-engined supercar 3 litre
V6 that does 0 to 60 in about 7.5 seconds. The performance figures aren't impressive by today's standards.
30 to say, we assume 100, was just lightning because of the VTEC and the V6.
Well, that's it. It revs to about 8,500.
Yes, something
revs.
like that. But when you hit that VTEC, like all these, EP3s and so on, it's just whoom, straight up. It is that good. But what does NSX stand for? New Sports Car Experimental. And the thing about the NSX, when it was launched, for an everyday driver, it made them look like a racing car driver. And for a racing car driver, well then it just delivered unparalleled performance, handling, and you could do things that you could only dream of in other cars.
Now, unfortunately, because it is 30 years old, you can't just go around into a showroom and buy one straight off the shelf. This one is considered priceless. Well, it's been driven by Senna.
Yes, Ayrton Senna himself, and he also put input into the development as well, and you can kind of feel it whilst you drive it.
Absolutely. But when they were new, they were around £60,000. There are very limited numbers of these cars left in the UK. In fact, most people have never actually seen one.
When we went to a meet at Chemical Guys this morning, we were chatting to people and they literally came up and said, we never thought we would ever see one of these in the flesh, let alone drive in to one of these events. Thank you, Honda.
It definitely does turn heads. Saying that, I'm going to be taking a look at the exterior styling.
I'll be looking at the interior, the practicality, the functionality, and that F-16 inspired cockpit.
I won't be driving it. You will be, because I'm not allowed to.
You actually do like me driving it though, don't you? I mean,
there's worse cars to travel in. Then
yeah.
Annabelle will bring you the verdict of the Honda NSX.
If you like cars and the latest car news, why not subscribe to the channel? Hit the notification bell, and that way you'll be notified every time that we upload a new video.
Thank you. The Honda NSX has a truly iconic design. Even now, it looks like it's just come out of a showroom. That's because it had a 23-step paint process. The colour really does pop. You do get a sense of how wide and how low the car is. However, you're still able to tackle things like speed humps. At slow speeds, you do have this plastic splitter at the bottom so you don't scuff the paint. There is also several air vents at the front, and they are all functional. The radiator is located at the front, however the engine itself is in the middle. At the front of the car, you don't have daytime running lights, but you do have side lights, pop-up headlamps with height adjustment, headlamp washers, windscreen wipers, and indicators. Coming to the side of the car, you have 16-inch alloy wheels on the front and 17-inch alloys on the back. You also have a 40 profile tyre, sporty door mirrors, side repeaters, pillarless doors. Our car also has an aftermarket Cobra alarm, NSX emblem, black roof and B-pillar, which goes very well with the dark coloured wheels. You do get a sense of how low the NSX is, as it only comes up to about my hip. It's not very practical for McDonald's drive-thru, but don't get me wrong, with these looks you want to be seen. Sporty side skirts, another vent on the side here, and the petrol cap is much closer to the door than you might expect. Usually it's back about here. But saying that, the engine is directly behind the fuel filler cap. You also have a electronic pop-up aerial. Coming to the back of the car, you have sporty twin exhausts, a rear diffuser and a recess for the number plate. You also have a reversing light, fog lamp and the glass cover over the engine. You can see it's powered by Honda. You also have a vent below that for cooling, and this integrated rear spoiler that is truly unique in design.
It's that simple. Okay, it does take a bit of getting used to. Grandma is not going to be leaping in. However, if she wants to ride in the NSX, she will no doubt find a way to get in. Really long doors, but very sturdy. Now, you can tell straight away that this car is unique, and that's because this cockpit is actually inspired by the F-16 fighter. Kind of makes sense when you look at it, doesn't it? Now, I'm just going to sit in awe for a bit, because this is, it takes me back to the 90s, it really does. Big dials, leather wrapped steering wheel, and this big chunky section, which it just reminds me of the games like Test Drive and that, where you'd see all these supercars and Gran Turismo and all these kind of games that had cars like these and cars of that era. Don't mind me, I'm just going to take a moment and collect my thoughts whilst being in awe at the fact that I am sitting behind the steering wheel of a car that Ayrton Senna actually drove. That in itself is absolutely phenomenal. Right, back to the review. So, leather wrapped steering wheel. You also have all round electric windows, power mirrors. Well, the glass moves in them anyway. Sports mirrors, but that's what you expect. I mean, the one thing about this car is you've got vents everywhere. Vents here, vents there, vent, 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 vent. That doesn't surprise you when this car actually tops out at 168 miles an hour, which doesn't sound fast by today's standards, because the Civic Type R FK8 will now do 169. But then, you know, that was a decent speed, and in a cabin like this you do need to stay ventilated. You have a horn on the steering wheel. You also have cruise control. It's really coolly designed. You've got these big chunky bits at the back, and you turn this for your hazards, and you press that, and you do this, and you do that. And the best thing about this car is the fact when you flash your lights, they pop up. Lights on this side, cruise control light there. You've also got other lights and traction control button here as well. Decent sized clocks, very, very reminiscent of the time. They just look very old school. You've also got inside there, it shows you which gear you're in. No sport mode. But you don't really need a sport mode when you're driving a V6 VTEC that permanently wants to be in sport mode, because that's how it's engineered. To the right you've got a fuel gauge, voltmeter. You've also got an analog trip computer. Staggeringly, this car has only done 24,702 miles. Realistically, we may have done 350 of those in 2 days, but that's because I can't stop driving this car. I really can't. Display with a clock. Digital climate control. Now, I didn't expect to see that. You've got the various shortcut buttons here, but the fact it's got a digital readout, really, really ahead of the time. Very good. Honda with Bose stereo system with RDS and Dolby button as well. Tape deck, as well as CD shuttle in the boot. As you expect, yes, of course it's got Bluetooth, of course it's got Apple CarPlay. No, it really doesn't. We're back in the 90s here. And on this, you have UW, long wave and medium wave. You've got your shortcut buttons as well, your RDS and your TPA buttons as well, so yeah, quite advanced for the time. On, off, the volume switch, and your tuning button here and digital display. Under here, as Michael mentioned, this appears to be a storage device, maybe an ashtray, who knows, and some kind of incendiary device here. Automatic gearbox, as I said, park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3, 2 and 1. Old school handbrake, fog lights, headlamp washers, and you can adjust the height of the light here. You're also reminded NSX, double overhead cam, VTEC power. You also have the visors here, which you expect, but you might not expect this one. So yeah, when you've got them all down, perfect. Perfect for racetracks. Unlike most of the cars that we drive today, and certainly a handful of cars 30 years ago, this is all leather, stitched, and it's very, very well finished. If you've noticed as well, it hasn't cracked. It's in remarkable condition. Everything about this car is superb. Big light up here. The thing is, this car is nothing like I've ever reviewed. I didn't expect to see full electric seats in this car. expected a driver's one, but certainly not a passenger one. Now, I was quite surprised that at 6'3", I have ample headroom. I mean, okay, if I decide to go for an 80s hairstyle, it will brush against. But sat like this, I'm very comfortable. As I mentioned before, they are electric seats. You can adjust the back and you can adjust the movement forwards and backwards as well. They're very comfortable, they're very buckety. The steering wheel has height adjustment. And also when it comes to storage, well, okay, you don't have any door bins, but you do have a speaker here. And you do have your boot pop on this door as well. You've got a storage point here which opens like so. Probably get a gold bar in there. And the last thing, the glove box. Decent size. Bottle of water, bag of sandwiches, gold bar. You also have a speaker here as well. As you can see, the center console and bill goes all the way down the car, so the passenger and the driver are completely separate. And there's glass here to separate you from the engine. So you only hear the tones that you really want to. So if you floor it, you will hear it. Other than that, it's rather refined. Behind me, I've also got the pop for the glass, so you can lift it up and you can look at the engine and check engine levels. It may be inspired by the F16, it may be comfortable, but the one reason you're buying this car is this. The V6 VTEC. Now the thing with the mid-engine sports car is the fact that the engine is not here. So utilise this space. On this car it's not used for storage. You have things like the radiator, the space saver and your fluids for topping up. There's also a fuse box there as well. When it comes to the boot of the car, you can open it using a key. Makes sense? Put in, turn, click. You also have a button on that door as well. Once open, decent sized boot considering it's a supercar and the engine's actually there. Nice rectangle space. You've also got your CD changer on this side. You can realistically get rather slimline suitcase in here, some shopping bags, some bags of champagne, a lobster and some caviar. All you need for your supercar in the 90s. Now one thing that you don't normally find on, well, any other car that we've ever reviewed ever, is this. Yes, a glass hatch that opens. And what does it unveil? Well, of course, the V6 VTEC engine. Got a strut brace here as well. 24 valve, 3 litre, and as I said, VTEC, naturally aspirated, no turbochargers. What's the Honda NSX like to drive? Well, it's powered by a VTEC V6 3 litre engine. You can also get a 3.2 as well. It's also automatic, and I think is it called F-matic?
Yes, it is.
4-speed as well.
Yes, over the 6-speed manual you would get in the manual version of the car.
And can it perform?
Oh yes, it can.
Well, there you go. And that's without the VTEC kicking in.
As this does rev to 7,500. It is
and it actually redlines at 9, but because it's an automatic and well, it does say in the glove box, doesn't it? Sympathetic driving. So we would never actually hit those revs in this car.
Well, that's it. Of course, you have to remember it is almost 30 years old.
And Ayrton Senna's driven this particular model as well. Yes, car. So it would be almost sacrilege to hammer it and ruin it. Exactly. Yes. So saying that, you can still get a feeling for the engine, the gearbox, the steering and the suspension with relatively spirited driving, would you say?
Yes, it's well, the performance is, well, hot hatchers.
Yes, it's 0 to 60 about 7.5, isn't it?
Yes, it's a hot hatcher by today's standards, yes. But of its day it was a supercar.
However, we're assuming between, say, I don't know, 50 and 160.
It's going to be a little faster.
I was going to say, any hot hatch would have a real challenge catching it.
What I get the impression is that it's very driver focused from the cockpit style layout and
Designed on the F16.
the buckety seats. It feels very driver orientated. Unfortunately, I can't actually drive this to give you my experience.
No, that's quite sad, isn't it?
I'll have to question you then.
You do, yes.
So, what's the steering like?
Like you would expect in a car of this age, it's heavy, and I mean heavy. Right. The way you would describe it is, I mean, driving along like this is perfectly fine, but if you start cornering hard, then you really need to be able to pull the steering. But that gives it real feeling. I mean, literally, you just do that and it will just whip. Point and basically steer. It is absolutely phenomenal. But I'm always going to love it, aren't I? Because it's like old school steering.
Well, I was also going to say the fact that it's mid-engined helps the fact that the steering is so agile.
Yeah.
Because of course it's more difficult to get the back end out.
Yes, well that's it. That's what they said, isn't it, when they launched this car? It's one of those cars that would make an ordinary driver look like a racing car driver, and if you are a racing car driver, then you can do absolutely phenomenal things with it.
I think that due to the automatic gearbox, though, you would lose some of the engagement you would from the manual.
Well, that's it. We can't really comment because we've never driven the manual, but of what I've driven it rather rapidly down some of the roads in the Lake District, haven't I, today?
Yes.
And was it quite an engaging and thrilling experience?
It certainly was. But what I would add is, in everyday use, the automatic is great because you haven't got to deal with a heavy clutch or, you know, a racing style gearbox.
No.
You just put it in drive and it goes.
Well, that was what it was pedalled as, isn't it? I think you mentioned it earlier in the video, the everyday supercar.
Exactly, and you can use this every day.
You really can.
Okay, the turning circle is quite large and it is low.
It is like a racing car.
But it's comfortable in here. The ride isn't too firm. It's firm enough to definitely have some spirited driving.
That's it. It's not as firm as the Golf with the conies and the H&R springs, which I expected it to be completely raw, and it isn't. I mean, you could go on a tour in this quite happily, couldn't you?
Well, I was going to say yesterday we went on a 3-hour drive and got out the other side and it was perfectly comfortable. In fact,
that's it. There's no backache or anything. It's just they're really bigger hugging seats, aren't they?
I would definitely say that I've got out of some modern vehicles that have been less comfortable than this.
Yeah, and you don't expect that, do you? That's it. It's very thick, decent leather, isn't it? It's very nice, quality, comfortable seat, whereas some cars aren't.
What's visibility like?
Compare it to something like a Countach, which was a similar time. You can see out of the windows, you see out of the back window, and you can see out of the windscreen rather easily as well. Whereas with the Countach, you'd have to open the door and reverse. With this, everything is really easy, and it's not particularly big.
No.
So yeah, and you've got the sporty mirrors, and they're quite wide as well, so quite easy to manoeuvre. Far easier than I expected.
The one thing I would note is because you are so low in this car, when you've got junctions and hills, it is very difficult to see around and over things.
Yeah, well, the other thing I noticed is at night, if someone's on the brow of a hill and you're below it, their full beam is in your face when they're on dips. But that's because you're in a low sports car. It's these kind of things you expect, isn't it?
Well, what's amazing about this car is the fact we're talking about it current day. This, you know, it is nearly...
It was groundbreaking, wasn't
30 years old.
Yeah.
And we've been driving around in it the last 3 days.
Yes.
Just like we would any other car. Every time you turn the key, it's gone. We've gone in the rain. We've gone in what is not considered supercar conditions.
Weather, yeah, exactly.
And it's coped with everything we've thrown at it.
And more. I mean, we were driving in, the only way you could describe it is absolutely torrential weather.
Yeah.
And it's easy to drive. You expect it to slide and be all, you know, a handful and such, and it just isn't. It is so driver orientated, yet easy enough to drive for the ordinary driver, or like it was pedalled for.
But the thing is, it's very sedate otherwise. You know, you can go around town and, okay, apart from the looks, people, you know, you wouldn't hear this car coming.
No, you wouldn't. No,
unless you want them to.
Exactly, that's what I like about this. And it's not noisy in the cabin, is it?
No.
I mean, okay, refinement's not like, say, a Phaeton or a Rolls Royce, but it's not going to be. It's a supercar from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
You know, you've got 16s on the front, 17s on the back, and low profile tyres. You're going to hear the road noise. But the one thing you can't hear, because of this glass behind you, is the actual engine, unless you floor it.
I would say that out of all the cars we've driven, this is one of the most impressive. It's got to be one of the automotive legends of our life. Well, your lifetime. It wasn't
Certainly,
quite in my lifetime. I'm 6 years younger than it.
I was going to say, yes, you are. Whereas, yeah, it was one of those cars that I remember seeing one about 15 years ago and thinking, oh, it's so small. And that was the last time I saw one 15 years ago. I've never seen one since. And that's what gets me about them. You want to stop traffic, you want an NSX.
Also, it's fair to say that you don't live in Knightsbridge.
No.
You know, you've got a driveway that's got potholes on it,
Oh,
and
yes.
there is speed humps, and
Yep.
there is, you know, traffic to negotiate around small villages, and this has been able to handle all of them things.
It has, yeah. Even though it's got a front splitter on it, it doesn't actually, unless it's a really big speed bump or a massive pothole, then you don't even know you're hitting them, do you?
No. One aspect that contributes to this car's performance is the weight. It weighs just over 1.4 tons.
Yeah, and look at the length of it.
But when you've got a V6 3 litre, well, that makes for some very impressive performance, especially with the mid-engine layout.
Plus, it's all aluminium, isn't it?
It is. It's
I mean, you lift that front bit, and it's literally, you can like lift it with one finger.
absolutely, considering the size of this car.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it comes up to about your hip.
Yes. I think the ride, although it is, you know, it is comfortable, it does handle every performance-related task that we've undertaken.
Oh, yes.
You have discs all round, they are vented, and despite being 30 years old, they are more than capable of stopping this car.
Oh my word, it's staggering. I mean, that's it. How many cars now realistically have rear vented discs?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Most have front, granted, but not many out there have rear.
we also have traction control and ABS.
The one thing about this car is, well, realistically, it is a racing car, isn't it? Maybe a supercar of that day, but it's a racing car. It's set up really wide. It's set up extremely low, so it handles like it's on rails. It accelerates like a train, and it keeps going because it's got a V6. I mean, just listen to it. It is absolutely phenomenal. And when you get the hang of it, it is so much fun. It really is.
I'd buy one in a heartbeat.
Yes. We need
And I
to
haven't
buy
even
one for the
driven it.
collection, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit of VTEC there. One thing you do notice is things like bridges, people don't see it because you're pretty much below the wall. One thing I also love about this is when you kick down or just floor it, it is so fast to respond. You can just hear it. It just goes.
It's a very well refined automatic gearbox, especially considering it's only 4-speed.
Well, yeah, that's it. And the other thing about it is economy isn't quite as bad as you would expect, is it? We thought it would be absolutely horrendous, didn't we?
We thought that we would be at the petrol station most of the time. And
Yes.
Okay, so far you've put £40 in it.
Yes, but we have done
A lot of
400
miles.
miles?
Yeah, we have been driving this car daily.
Yes, we have. Got a quarter of a tank of fuel, and we're probably getting, I mean, what's it claimed? 23 to the
Yeah.
gallon?
I think we must be getting about that.
Yeah, which I don't think's bad. But this performance and the fact of the heritage of this car and the fact you're driving an Icon, I think that's perfectly acceptable. And we know that I have a lead foot from every review ever. So, yes.
But also there isn't necessarily that urge to drive it like that. It is very comfortable just to
Well, it's
cruise
funny
around
that you
it.
say that, isn't it? I mean, we sometimes drive, I mean, you do the odd boot, granted, but then the majority of the time you'll poodle along at 40 miles an hour, won't you?
Yeah.
And you'll just, I mean,
Happily do
you're in
it.
awe at the fact that everybody that sees it literally stops and looks because it is so iconic. And I don't think we can say anything more, can we?
I was going to say, overall, it's definitely one to buy. If you have, what, 45,
Yeah.
60,000 pounds to
And
spend
you're lucky enough to find one.
on a classic icon,
Yeah.
the NSX is definitely a car to consider.
Seriously.
The NSX we have here is rather special. It was developed in conjunction with Ayrton Senna, and it is the oldest surviving example in the UK. In fact, this was Ayrton Senna's company car. How cool is that? NSX stands for New Sports Car Experimental, and there are two engines available. A 3.2 litre with a manual gearbox and a 3 litre with a 4-speed automatic gearbox. The one we have here has the 3 litre V6 24-valve VTEC engine and delivers 270 brake horsepower. It will get you from 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds and tops out at 168 miles per hour. Not bad for a car that's 30 years old. It's also rear-wheel drive and weighs just 1.4 tonnes. This was the supercar you could drive to the shops, and with its mid-engine configuration and all aluminium construction, you get around 23 miles to the gallon. The attention to detail in this car is absolutely astounding. Even the spare wheel jack is made from alloy rather than steel in order to save weight, and the cockpit is made from glass. And if this isn't raw enough for you, there is the NSX R, which is lighter, quicker and more engaging. Sleek, stylish, and for 1988, devilishly fast, the NSX is a unicorn in the world of cars,